she is watching her was the first inauguration I've ever watched. I have never watched a US president be inaugurated. I never did. I never, but
Can
I
you tell
can
us
get,
why quickly, please?
they're boring and I've never been interested.
Not even Obama?
No, and I didn't trust politics.
Right. Fair.
Living a dream, living the African dream.
Brothers and sisters, welcome to Pan African Lifestyle, the ultimate Pan African hub. I am your host, Harrison Paul, and we post here regularly, so we would not want you to miss it. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to stay connected. Today's guest is a true bridge builder between the African diaspora and the African continent. She's an accomplished business consultant, entrepreneur, and co-founder of Shofar Business Consultants based in Namibia. Her work helps investors, expats, and travelers turn their African dreams into real, lasting experiences. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Krystal Covington to the Pan African Hub. Krystal, how are you?
Hey, you've made my day today. Thank you so much.
They're quite good, aren't they? Those introductions. It's good, isn't it?
I love it.
How are you, Krystal? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I had my exercise today. I got my walk. One of my new friends around here has, become my walking buddy. So I got my exercise. I'm good.
Nice, nice. You're an exercise junkie as well, like myself, which is good, which is very good. So we've got lots of questions, really, really interesting questions today. I'm sure the viewers cannot wait to find out. You're a very accomplished woman. You've built a six-figure marketing agency in the US, and now you settle in Namibia, helping others transition and invest. What inspired this journey from America to Africa?
It's wild when I tell people because I never was a spiritual person in my life, but it's spiritual. In the past, I remember years back, I think, when Ghana did their year of return and all that, my husband saying, would you ever consider moving to Africa? And I said, no. Why would I ever? I have a good life. Life is fine. I mean,
Right.
a women's organization, I had everything together and it just seemed wild. But then there just became this pull. And it started with him feeling like we needed to do something different. And, around the time that we started to learn about Namibia and Namibia started coming to our minds, we had been working with another couple to try to figure out how we might together go and make like a family compound somewhere and kind of get out of the labor that we were doing because in living in Denver, Colorado, it's very expensive. So you got to do a lot of hustle. We were still, really in the hustle to try to keep up those, high numbers of income. And we had this goal of one day kind of semi-retiring, not like sitting on our butts, but slowing
Right,
down.
right, right, right.
Yeah. And the options we looked at in the States were just very difficult still. So even when we did the math and we talked to realtors in different states, we were not finding the solution that really was going to work for us. And the best solution ended up being on a whole other continent. And it solved a lot of the things, almost every single thing that we were looking to solve was solved by just relocating somewhere else.
And look, somewhere else is not is very broad. Usually people who relocate or especially specifically to Africa, there is this, I want to say, Pan-African mentality. Would you have considered yourself as like a very pro-Black person, even growing up in America? Like, would that have been something that you've always, identified with? Of course, you're an African American, but were you like pro-Black in that sense?
I think as we get older, sometimes we start associating everything we think today as what we thought back then. But I know that I grew into it. So I was just somebody today and remembering this book about I can't even remember the destruction of Africa, I think it was called. But I forgot that I had even read that book, and that book came out in 2019. So I know I was on this journey for a while of starting to relearn things. I remember seeing a video on social media that said that we needed to go back and look at Martin Luther King's last speeches because he had shifted, but the way we're sold him and his talks and what people talk about him isn't the way he ended his life. The re- and the reason they ended his life. So I remember going back and re-listening to his talks and saying, "Oh my goodness." And it awakened me in a way that I hadn't really, with new perspectives, I hadn't really seen.
Right. No, I'm listening. Please go ahead. I'm really enjoying this. Continue. I feel like you want to continue. Continue.
Oh, so I was just going to say, it's a journey that evolved over time. And even when we first got here, I had been on the journey now. There were so many books that I had gotten. A lot of them are on audio
Mm,
books that I can re-listen to on audio, but I had to make decisions on what I was going to bring and what I was going to leave. But there was a lot of material there. This hefty book called The Blueprint for Black America, where it was kind of talking about everything we ever needed to do to change everything. So while I probably wasn't always for my whole life a Pan-Africanist nor interested in Africa in that way, I became so over the last 6 years or so as I began to really understand things. I had always been involved in women's empowerment and in different, I had been involved in like Black women political groups and things
right.
like
Right. Right.
those. In college, I was in groups for Black women and things like that, but we didn't really have a lot of association with Africa as well. So it was very separate. It was just about the Black American experience or the Black woman's experience.
Mm-hmm.
Really understanding that we had a shared experience is something that is recent, and it was just so powerful to really understand. And it didn't
Mm,
to the level that it's at today until I got here and I realized what they had been through. And
mm,
honestly, I had stereotypes of Africans,
right.
right? I thought that I always thought of them as they show up and they jumbo and they're
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
But I thought of them as, you grew up with your elders. You have all these, I thought they had it all together. You had all this sacred spirituality and all these things. But then I got here and I realized, no, they're as westernized as we are,
Wow.
just as much built up trauma as we have.
Wow. Wow.
So it
Wow.
was it was a big aha and a big connecting force for me to realize that we have really been on a similar journey. It sounds different because we've been on our different parts of it,
Right. Right.
but it is a very shared journey that we've been on.
Wow, Krystal, everything is just happening again. It's huge. I'm huge into spirituality as well, but from a Christian standpoint. But it's like even recently we just had the CEO of African Ancestry on, Dr. Page, and we actually had brought a young lady on who was finding out where she was from, and it was such a beautiful moment for me to be there and to experience this and kind of host this show. But we touched on that and that fear about Africa, that kind of fear of the unknown that a lot of African Americans had. And she obviously doing what she does, she's able to bridge that gap because she helps someone understand that they're from maybe Namibia, and then they go back to find, the ancestry, and then maybe they go back there, and a lot of people actually end up relocating. A lot of people end up just kind of like really wanting to delve into that culture, which is just such an amazing thing to have you on here today. And like, I know that Shofar Business, you guys don't just give business, consultancy. You guys give, you help people relocate, you help people invest. From you, was there any bloodline with Namibia? What kind of caused you, or I want to say inspired you to think Namibia out of all places in Africa?
So just that natural connection for my husband's side, for me, it's been hard to track where I'm
Mm,
on that. I've done the ancestry websites. I even had a friend that was so sure he could figure out where I was from. He had his fancy, he had the upgraded ancestry.com subscription and tried to figure all this stuff out. And he just gave up on me. So I can't figure this out. in my DNA test that I bought, I didn't get the one that my husband did where he got more information.
Right.
So I cheap one that just says broadly African, broadly West African, broadly this. But for him, he has been able to bring himself, bring some information back to this place. And one of the things that he found is he believes his family line came from that Angola port there.
Mm-hmm.
He has direct connections in his DNA paperwork, his haplogroup DNA. It mentions a group that's here. And then it does also, in his trying to track pathway, he was able to find that he may have come from that Angola port.
Right. So your husband then is Namibian, and
That's
or are you guys you say that's what you're saying, right?
I'm saying there's a connection. I don't want to just say he's Namibian, but yes, he has a connection to this port, being taken from this port, and a
Right,
connection.
right, right. And he's from Michigan also?
Yeah, yeah, he's also from Michigan.
Okay. All right. So the decision for Namibia was made before he realized that there was a connection or after he realized there was a connection?
He had seen we had already decided on Namibia, and then he had been looking at his DNA paperwork, and he said, what is this Herero thing? And we started looking it up. And then we found out about this whole genocide and all these bad things that happened
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
And I said, wow, okay, that's a deep thing to be connected to. And so that started our more in-depth research and him going into more information. And then something had showed up online where he found out he could go and kind of seek out more of information of where certain groups came from, various ports. And that's when he really found out. That was actually when we were here that he figured out that he may have come from that Angola port.
Crazy. Like I love magical stories like this. You know, and obviously we know that there's the new president. So you guys have been there now. You're enjoying how many years are you guys there now?
Just one year so far.
Just
Yeah.
1 year so far. Okay. And you've got a new president. I want let me know, like she's the first female head of state. From your perspective, like how's it been and what's the air in the country right now?
I feel like it's very positive right now. She is watching her was the first inauguration I've ever watched. I have never watched a US president be inaugurated. I never did. I never, but
Can
I
you tell
can
us why quickly, please?
they're boring and I've never been interested.
Not even Obama?
No, and I didn't trust politics.
Right. Fair.
I watched him wave on stage and I blew kisses to his family. I did see him on stage in real life.
Okay. So did I. He came to Ireland because I was raised in Ireland and I saw him there, but continue.
Okay. Yeah, so I watched hers and I was just blown away. I actually was in tears because I had never seen anything like that. I mean,
Mm,
it a woman being placed in that position. And then what they said about her, the tears came when I was listening to the man sharing her background because I really did not know. I had seen newspaper articles about her. I hadn't taken it seriously because in my mind, women don't ever win these things. So I just kind of ignored it. And then she won, and I said, well, how? Oh my goodness. And then
mm,
her background was read off, and I was blown away because I felt like it meant that somebody was being put in their rightful place. She had been there from the beginning. She was a freedom fighter from the beginning. She knows the
mm,
whole journey. So she has
mm.
seen the journey. She even was in exile for a time, just like the
Wow.
president. And so she has all of the qualifications and what I would consider the spiritual qualifications, which
Yeah,
is having
yeah.
that empathy and that knowing of
Right.
understanding where you've been and where you've been trying to get this whole time
Mm-hmm.
is in the place to go in and get that done. And I do believe, and they often say that all the women stuff I used to study, they will often say women get the tough jobs when it's these pivotal moments when
Yeah.
on the line. And I think she did get the tough job when everything is on the line because this is a really critical moment in the country's
Mm,
history and future because they've been 35 years independent. They just celebrated that. And they're in this moment where if they don't make certain decisions right now, certain things won't progress and they must
mm,
because they have
mm,
growth. Their young population has boomed over the past
mm,
10 years, and it's going to continue to grow. And they
mm,
have to create the future for these young people.
mm. Oh, wonderful. And I just have to take a little pin in what you just mentioned there. You kind of said that we always call a woman at a pivotal moment to come and do something that's so important. It reminds me of how everyone was calling on Michelle as a last ditch resort last year. And it also reminds me how we were trying to bring, Kamala into office. And then the next thought comes to my mind is you've only been gone a year. That didn't influence you. You didn't kind of see Trump on his way in and say, listen, I'm not going to stick around for this. Was there any sort of feeling of that or
No, I really, when we left, was he even in I don't
not
even
yet?
happening yet. Yeah. So it wasn't a part of it at all. We just had the inkling to go and it was the right time. So my
Mm-hmm.
husband to make it work with the job front. I was running my company, so I could go wherever. It didn't really matter as
Mm-hmm.
long as internet. And so it was the exact right time. We actually had meant to stay a little longer, but then some things worked out perfectly for us to go. And my husband said, "This is the time we have to do it now."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There were tenants living in our house. The original owners had stuck around, and we said, "Hey, kind of need you to move now because we're gonna go stay in the house now." We had purchased the house already, and we just had it being rented.
Amazing. Like okay, it wasn't running away from Trump, but
No,
even though it wasn't, I am seeing online that there are a lot of people as things begin to unfold there who are probably having the inspiration to get up and go. And you and your husband have created such a trusted path for Americans, Black Americans specifically, to make their way, we'll say, back home. What is like the mindset shifts that that African Americans need in regards to practical steps for them to kind of make Namibia their home? What are like the mindset shifts?
it's funny. I was just talking to a friend of mine who had moved from Costa Rica to the United States, and I was telling her, I am sorry, I never understood this journey. Being an immigrant in another country is a big deal. It's no small matter. And I
Hmm.
important for people to recognize that we have been so accustomed to everybody accommodating us. And generally, especially if they're coming from the States, if you're coming from any Western nation, and if you're coming from the States especially, you have been accommodated. And the people who come to journey to the US or other Western places, they don't necessarily teach a lot about where they're coming from because they're there to escape or to grow financially and all of that. They're focused on their goal, and so we often have a lack of knowledge of what these countries,
Hmm.
and we don't necessarily have the patience for that immigrant experience of being other in some way. And one of my big surprises was that there were so many things that were different and that I had to just humble myself and learn to ask. And we've made some really great friends because of that need to build a trusted network of people who can help us and really help us to understand what's going on and get comfortable with um, all of the differences. And there are many. And one of the biggest things also to recognize is um, money is so different in different countries. And very easily because of your money mindset from where you come from. When we first got here, we thought everything is so cheap. It just felt like
Hmm.
our
Right,
money,
right,
it just
right,
felt like,
right.
oh, great, I'll just do that. I'll just do that. But eventually those things start to add up. And so you have to come and try to get an understanding of financial value and what things
Mm,
cost, what people are paid, and what the money is worth as fast as you can. We got that lesson from a friend who had experienced that financial loss right away upon getting here, and he gave us the rundown and said, "Look, you can lose your money really fast if you're not careful, and you need to learn how the money works." And so we started having dialogue about things, and people started teaching us what is an hourly salary, what does a professor make, what is that. We told
mm.
Well, we were paying our babysitter, and they said, whoa, 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 that's like an elite salary here. So all those little things were just big learning lessons for us that we had to really take in. Um, and then another big thing that was a mindset shift for us is in the States, I felt like, I mean, granted, we have little nuances like your Creole or your Cajun and your light
Right,
skin
right, right.
and things in the States. But generally, everybody calls themselves either Black or African
Yeah,
American, all lumped into one group.
yeah.
But here, there is no lumping into one group. There are so many tribes, at least in the country that I'm in. There are several tribes. And learning that and learning the nuances between tribes, they speak very many languages. And so it was a mindset shift to realize that even being what we would call Black, they still have more categories. And those categories mean something. They deeply mean something to them. And that's something
Mm,
that I had exposure to.
mm. You, you're saying some interesting things because now I'm getting in really into this. You know, I, again to reference the last interview with the African ancestry, we were speaking about African American culture in comparison to African culture, right? And one of the things she was like, it's okay if we don't have, let's say, Congolese values or Namibian values. We it's not our fault that we don't know where we come from, but we created something here that no one can deny. And one of the things I mentioned to her is that you guys actually created a sense of a revolutionary mind. You guys have always, African Americans have always led, the revolution, whatever it may have been. You spoke today about Martin Luther. You spoke today about not today, but Malcolm X. We all the greats we knew, even if we think about James Baldwin, spokespeople, came from America. And through all the years, you guys garnered and developed this unified front, which is what we call Black America. So I think, in a way, and I want to ask you that: do you think maybe because we know in Africa sometimes we struggle with advancing due to tribalism? Do you feel as though that was a positive or negative? Do you feel like maybe in America, and I'm going off here a little bit because this is such an interesting point. Do you feel like, in America, actually I can give this to Namibia, this sense of like, listen, I'm Black, you're Black, we are one at the end of the day, whether you speak Creole, whether you speak, yeah. So what do you think about that?
I think that it's got it's each side has its values. So I sometimes envy the fact that they have these close cultural values
Mm-hmm.
that they're like I sat down with somebody yesterday. She is Vambo, Oshivambo, and she was telling me about some of her cultural traditions and things like that. She invited us to come to a wedding this summer, just beautiful cultural values, beautiful cultural background because she grew up in the village and she had the chance to do the village life and the city life, and she is boss in the city life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that perspective is so wonderful. But I do believe that the level of being one helps us all to just say, hey, when we got to college, we all just grouped together. We were 10% of the population. I think
There you
maybe I'm
go.
kidding, but it was just, we're all one group. And so everybody knew each other. And there was instant acceptance into this group. And we all had our little organizations. The minute I got to college, they all pounced me and said, you got to join this, you got to join this. I joined them all. I was part of
Mm,
everything. And that is not the same here. So I sat down with somebody one day and she was kind of talking about a challenge she even experienced at work where somebody accused her, she's a manager, and somebody accused her of having preference for someone else that is of a
mm,
of her tribe. So because they're the same tribe, then the other person said, you're against me because the other person speaks the same language. And so it's one of those things that, again, I could never comprehend because it's not something I would understand
right.
from perspective, but it would, in essence, make it where they're not necessarily going to group together, clump together,
Mm,
and say we're all, because everybody is their own separate group and they don't look at it like that.
mm. But that's what that's what you guys can offer to us, and I'm excited about, African Americans going back homes. I think there's a revolutionary mind that you can definitely bring to Africa. And now we'll go back on topic and just ask you, um, give us now some practical steps. So if someone wants to move back, here are maybe 2 steps, 3 steps, practical steps that in order to make that big move.
First step, get that stuff out of the house. If you have a house, if you have all these things, that you've accumulated, start deaccumulating and detaching yourself. And that process is part of letting go of what you had so that you can be comfortable where you go. So the first
Mm,
step is getting yourself emotionally prepared. Step two is figuring out the processes because every country has so many different nuances in how they process the visa applications, how long you can stay. In Namibia, everybody I know kind of starts with this investor visa, or it's actually written as an employment visa, but for you to work for your own country, your own company. But you have to be prepared to, know what business you're going to run or invest in a business here so that you can have that investor visa opportunity. But you have to be, ready with your finances. You have to be ready with some sort of knowledge of what kind of things you can contribute to the country. So having that awareness of what your skills are, what your background is, and what kind of things you can actively and wisely do. I see people try to do things that are a little bit of a stretch for them. And if you don't have a lot of savings, that can be dangerous because you might run out of cash. The
mm,
things you have some exposure to and wisdom in, and then just being aware ahead of time of all the nuances of the places that you're at, safety, where are the best places to um, be, as especially as a foreigner, where are you going to be most comfortable and where are people going to be most comfortable with you, and just having all that preparation together of the mindset, letting go, being financially prepared, knowing where you're going to put your dollars, and then knowing where you should hang around.
mhm. And of course, we talk about living and working there, and it made me think about how easily they can hit the ground running. Did you feel welcomed? And I want to say this in a positive way. Do you sometimes feel almost put in a pedestal in a positive way that obviously you guys and us have been able to operate in Western society, and there's qualities that we can bring having had lived in Western society. Do you feel like people put value in that, and it's like you won't be starting from ground zero? You'd be able to kind of, like you said, know the value you bring into a company. Do you feel like that's spotted, or do you feel like it's like, okay, you got to go right to the bottom once you get here, like the people who are welcoming you in? Do you understand that question?
I think it's going to depend on the person, but we are from our the things that we bring are definitely things that are seen at a high level because we were both corporate executives. I brought high level entrepreneurship background. I ran women's organizations, something that when people hear about that, they love it because they would love to have things like that here. We both been in the media. When people search us, they can find easily.
Mm-hmm.
So those things are highly valued. I can't say that it's necessarily just because of being from the West, because a lot of
Right.
people have experiences. We have a nice network here where people, there are many people who have been in Namibia for quite some time, and they've taken a while to build themselves up, but not all of them came from the same backgrounds that we have, so they did have different experiences. So it will depend on the person. It will depend on where you're coming from and the skills that you brought. In general, though, yes, there will be some assumption if you're, depending on what Western country you're coming from, there will be some assumption of value that you're bringing because they just assume you come from a place that has been very successful and thriving. And when you come from a first world country, as they call it, then you're, that the resources that you had available and what you've seen is
Yes.
that is useful because now you know what could be created because you've seen how it can work
Yes.
structure.
Right.
And some of us also have all that these big business backgrounds. Like I've worked in Fortune 500 companies, all that sort of thing. And that's also really valued because they want to create more big enterprises like that. And there needs to be people who have that mindset to be able
Mm-hmm.
to lead in those capacities.
Mm-hmm. And it so it also makes me think that you said we've got jobs, people who can obviously give and offer themselves into some sort of a corporate environment, but I know that you also are the co-founder of Diaspora Development Hub, where you focus on global investors, investing in strong local businesses. Um, why do you believe this kind of cross-continental collaboration is key to Africa's future?
I think it solves both problems. So on our side, in order for us to get here, we have to be investors. We started with our own company, but then we immediately found a local business to invest in. Somebody who had smart ideas and who was already doing something. I mean, he delivered my groceries when I got here, and I said, "Okay, you're my friend now." How? Because I need service. I need services like this. I need people who can help me. He was very nice. And so, coming and combining with him, he has so many connections. He turned out to be so well connected politically and socially. And so it actually helped to shorten some of our learning curve because we could call him up and say, "Hey, can you help us out here? We don't know how this works." And he was very gracious to support us because now we're becoming business partners. And
Mm,
so almost, kind of like bought into a family member, which he has a beautiful family as well. But it also helps these small business owners because in Namibia, for example, there's not a big debt system. In the
mm,
States, I had so many different forms of debt that I could take on for my company. Even when I struggled in 2020, my women's organization was shut down, and that was 60% of my income. And so
mm,
the Small Business Association stepped in and they gave me about a half a year worth of money to help me to make it and figure things out. And that really helped me to be able to continue working. I didn't have debt in the beginning of my business, but I recognized how debt can really help you to build
right.
up. They don't necessarily have that here. It
Mm,
does mean that if they're running a business, they're likely very profitable because they're not in a debt system like we were. But having infusions of cash is the difference between staying stagnant and being able to scale. There are
mm,
businesses here that are really doing well. They're profitable. They are providing relevant services to the community. They are brilliant people that know how to use their resources and have been paying attention to the trends, but if they don't get an influx of cash, they just can't, they're not going to be able to do it. And so when the diaspora comes and says, well, I need to invest in something, and they say, well, I need an investor,
Mm,
and are qualified, both are, have a great connection with one another, it's an ideal solution. And so we created the business that we have. That's the underlying purpose of Shofar Business Consultants. We ended up evolving into helping people with tours and things like that, because then they would say, well, can you tour me around? We say, well, I guess we can rent a van and take you on a tour. Yeah. And so we trained a tour guide. And so
wow.
we evolved into these other services, that somebody would say, well, can you just help us build our whole strategy? And so we said, okay,
Wow.
well, we'll with a fee structure for that. And so those things came second to the initial purpose of helping people build connections and potentially find partnerships so that they can help Namibians build their businesses while also growing their wealth as investors. And then our belief is that that creates a really great connection, because most of the friends that I had, a lot of my friends were people that I had done business with. I had either served them
Mm,
as an assistant, they might have been members of my women's organization, or I paid them to do work. And I recognized that business was a great connector of people. They're still my friends. And when we create those business connections, this is when our livelihood is tied to each other. That is
mm,
the greatest relationship builder that there ever can be, when your livelihood is tied together. You have to have arguments. You have to, deal with challenging,
mm,
tough decisions. And that builds family, that builds.
mm,
So I think it just solves so many things. It solves our connection issue because we don't necessarily know each other. We haven't had the chance to really build those bonds. And then, it creates new investment opportunities and helps build the wealth here. And then it opens up the door for the next level of Africa's growth to be held in the hands of all people of African descent. If we
mm,
can all, bring our dollars, I mean, it's trillions of dollars that are in the hands of the African diaspora all over the world. We're so many places, we're everywhere. So if just a
mm,
small percentage came and brought their money back to Africa and invested
right.
it here, it would blow up. I mean, in all of our knowledge, we've been building so many things. I mean, both my husband and I have been behind, really huge programs. We've traveled the world and throughout the United States for the jobs that we've had, and we've built those places up. We've given so much of our brain power to it and worked with teams. We could do that here and
Mm,
create things that are transformational for the world.
right. Yes, yes. I see a lot here. And you obviously have that comparison between understanding the American landscape for, the business world in the US, and also the African one. And it's so important that people, and especially particularly African Americans, begin to understand really, what the African continent offers. And one of the things that my mother actually wrote a book about decolonizing the mind. One of the things she touched on was how even the concept of intelligence, right? If it's not put in a university book that's written by a white man, it's not considered intelligence. But you see these people on the ground and how they manage to use their resources to actually create businesses. And one thing about African people, and you're seeing it now, is that they actually are probably more business orientated than we are, because they don't have, social welfare to fall back on. They have to find a way to make money, and they have to find a way to survive. So it's quite interesting that you're actually seeing this live, and you see people who are very, I want to say, entrepreneurial in their way, but it's not considered that because I guess that man is not wearing a suit, or not wearing not kind of wear a suit and tie. Do you feel like now? This one of the last things I'll ask you. Do you feel like, does it really come down to even being able to see? Forgive me because I'm very a skewed or rather small perception of Africa. Not small, but like it's narrow on the lens. Is it like as simple as seeing someone on the street selling something, and then you're kind of like, we can do something with this?
It is as simple as that, or visiting a farm and saying, "Hey, could you build up this chicken coop and have some more eggs?" Yeah, yeah. If I had more eggs, I could sell more eggs and then we'd have more. I mean, it's basic stuff. You brought up the person on the street. The first big conversation I had that blew me away was a guy on the street that sells handbags. And
Wow.
this guy was telling me about business concepts I had never heard of. And he was
Wow.
books he read that I said, okay, let me write that book down. He's just this young man. I don't know how young he is, but he had so much energy. He has to be in his young 20s. Um, and he was telling me all the things. He said, I told him what I was working on. He said, okay. He said, well, you need to find somebody to compete with this and compete with this. If you could build a warehouse in this area, you will make a lot of money. He said, these people can work for you. There's a lot of staff there. He was giving me all the stuff. I took notes.
Wow.
So it's incredible that the amount of entrepreneurial wisdom
Yeah.
in his hands, but the resources aren't there. And the
Yeah.
one barrier he had was he didn't know, because I said, well, can you give me a proposal or some accounting or anything like that? But he doesn't know how to do that stuff and he can't afford to pay like an accountant. They're very expensive. Um, he said he can't afford an accountant or any of that sort of thing. And I think his business isn't officially registered, but he knows so much. I mean, if he just had the business registration and the resources and all that somehow, created with him, he could be able to do a lot because he has the brain power for it. But somebody would, an older person that has more experience would have to, help lead that.
Right.
And that's a great synergy of someone that knows production and understands it and can help him because he's already doing the thing. He's buying materials from China. He wants to be able to produce it in his country. And if somebody could help him to produce it, get the whole process in the country, he would be so pleased and he would be more profitable.
Wow. You know, you are really tapping into what true Pan Africanism is. It is seeing the beauty in Africa that we have been indoctrinated not to see. And you are literally, that's what you're doing right now. So like, it's just fascinating for me to have even sat with you today, honestly. And everyone who comes on this show, we always want to ask them, what is your perception of the African dream? What does that mean to you? And I'll lead down from what I said in regards to Pan Africanism and just how you've moved in this last year. What is that dream for you?
For me, the African dream is African ownership of Africa and
Yeah,
having that be and I know everybody's, in love with Ibrahim Traore and he's kind of like the start of that spark of us believing that that's possible, that
yeah,
we can take back the production and charge what the minerals are worth.
you right.
Just basic ownership of all the things. And even Miss Nandi Ndaitwa, I hate that I can't say her name with the right pronunciation. I'm learning every
You better
day.
than me, girl.
That woman, that, Madam President, she spoke of things that you would think, that make people, clutch their pearls a little bit about
Right.
what with what she's saying, but she's looking for reforms in various areas that are pivotal to this is part of the whole transition of Africa is taking back these things that have been being held for all these years
Yeah.
and they're not producing anything. So she's trying to make this country a producing country and take some of the lost, I want to say it carefully, but some of the lost resources and make
Yeah.
sure they are used to make her people, the people that have been here for generations, to help them to progress, to reduce they have high unemployment. They should not have to
Mm,
be here in a country
yeah.
so, so to be able to look at it like that and say, you know what, we already have what we need. We don't need anything from anybody else. We need to learn to utilize what we have effectively. And we also need our people to come home and come help us restore this place to its glory.
Krystal, ladies and gentlemen, Krystal, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for all your meaningful work. Thank you for your passion that goes behind it. To you and your husband, Benny, honestly, for helping people relocate, reconnect in a real and lasting way. We just want to thank you so much here, pal, for coming on today. And I'm sure everyone is going to love this dialogue that we just had, and it's going to really inspire some people. And if we get any messages coming through about who this video inspired to make the big jump, we'll be letting you know and connecting them with you. Thank you so much, Krystal.
Thank you. Thank you to
God
Pan
bless
African.
you. Thank you. And to our global pal nation, yet again, as usual, thank you so much for tuning in. Please keep the conversation alive. Let us know what part of today's dialogue sparked new thinking, new pride, and new action. I've been your host, Harrison Paul. Thank you so much.
Living a dream, living the African dream.